Welcome to the Invincible Innovation Show, the podcast for changemakers. Each week, I talk to the most fascinating entrepreneurs and innovation leaders about innovation, strategy, and design. Hey everyone! Today we're going to talk about innovating the fast-moving consumer goods industry. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live Show. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Mazor Kario, innovation and value creation expert, and I'll be your host. And today with me, I have a very special guest. Hello. Hi, Misha.
Hey, Eddie. Thanks for
Hey.
having me.
Sure. Misha De Sterke, senior
Yes,
partner at Innoleaps.
correct.
So we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're so invited to join the discussion and ask questions, and we'd love to hear what you're thinking. And now we can start. I'll start with a very general question, but I always ask something which is like, we need to start from something which is like everybody's asking that. It seems that all companies need to innovate. So what is the most and biggest obstacle for innovation?
The company itself. So, what is interesting is that innovation is a broad term, and I always make a distinction in, let's say, more incremental and efficiency innovations, adjacent and disruptive. And therefore, to specify the type of innovation that we work on creates a bit more clarity on, what's the challenge for corporations. And the challenge is that, in essence, when we talk about FMCG companies, in this case, they have a lot of smart people around product knowledge, about branding. So they are well equipped to run, I would say, incremental innovations. Can we launch a new taste of a product? Can we launch a new pack? I still think we can speed that process up, but in general, they are equipped to work on that piece. Now, the tough cookie is at what if your existing category is declining in sales? So, yeah, the product in itself is not the only reason why people leave and go for a next or for a new product, right? So it becomes more around disruptive innovations. But we also need to specify that term, by the way. Some clients talk about beyond the core business innovations. So everybody has sort of their own terminology to talk about. So what's actually the new wave of products and services that we need to launch to retain the customer? Now, and when it comes to disruptive innovations, the biggest obstacle is the way the company is organized to make money at that moment. So
Yeah.
a long question for a short, a long answer for a short question.
Yeah.
When it comes to disruptive innovations, the organization itself is the biggest problem, and how they are organized to make money.
So they're doing what is the default processes of like doing things which are the market needs a new taste, a new like small, I know, maybe change the product a bit or package it differently, but they're not thinking really out of the box, like really into a new category, into something that they never created, and into a new industry maybe.
And imagine this situation, Eddie, is that we know, for example, in the food business, with all these documentaries about Seaspiracy and Game Changer.
I know this one.
Right? So there's a big understanding in general, I would say, or I hope at least, that we need to start creating new types of products. So what happens is the dynamic, right? So in the internal company. So if I need to grow at a certain rate for my shareholders, everything that dilutes is a problem to get funds and resources. Well, every new type of innovation, when it comes about new markets, it always starts small, so it always dilutes in the beginning. So the way the organization is designed to make money with certain margins, etc., is the biggest blocker to invent the future.
Yeah, so it's like short term and long term. Yesterday I heard a podcast called Land of the Giants, and it talks about the big tech giants, and they had one podcast about Amazon, and they said like the most prominent thing about Amazon when they were even like a small store, a bookstore, is that Jeff Bezos said that it's all for the long run. They always see the long run and what they're doing. So maybe currently they are not that big or not that successful, or the profits is not as they thought it would be, but they're investing to the future from the beginning. Yeah. And you see companies doing it like, yeah, we need to think about the next quarter or the next year, more or less. Yeah. And therefore, all our resources are aimed to that. And if you're creating something new, it's an investment. So it takes money out of your pocket, not the other way around at the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that's at what time frame are you investing? I think that's a super relevant question, because I think we all understand that when it comes to food, there's a new wave of consumer trends and products coming. And that's the big thing. That's the next big thing to invest in. And large corporations are doing that. But also too much a bit about around acquisitions, and I feel the fast and the first mover advantage is relevant in disruptive innovations, less in incremental innovations. But if you're not the first mover in disruptive innovations, it's difficult to get a strong foothold in the market and start building it. And then you can of course acquire that company, but what's then actually what you acquire? Right, because a lot of acquisitions are expensive and do not meet ambitions and expectations. Sure. Why? Because what is in the end actually that you acquire, right? Is it only a product? Is it customer base? Is it a brand? Yeah, you have a lot of people that you get. How does that work? So it's challenging. Also,
and in many cases, they think they get something, but in the end, it's not what they're getting. So many people leave afterwards. Many of the talents are leaving. The connection between the company and the merged startup is not working well. And sometimes they're even like pressing them down and not giving them the option to really grow in many senses, because they're taking the processes from their own company to what they're doing. Yeah. So it's not working. But I'm very curious to hear, like, you talk to these leaders, and I'm a vegan, so I really, really want to know, is it like when they hear all these, like, the game changers and all people talking about changing their lifestyles and the way they eat, is it like resonating? Do they feel stressed, or they say, okay, that's a trend, it's okay?
No, I do think they take it seriously, and investments are really backing that up. The part is that, which is related a bit to our first topic, do we have the patience to grow it to such a large business? Because they always look, of course, when you talk about a food company, can we scale it in retail? And can we put an existing brand on it? Because if you put an existing brand on a new product and you can sell it in retail, it's basically you make it scalable in their own organization. Because when you put an existing brand, I also got access to the salespeople behind it. If there's a new brand, who is there? There's nobody, If you knock the door on a new brand, nobody opens up. So it's difficult to scale. So I think the sweet spot, or whatever we need to figure out as corporate innovators, is, okay, so how can we jump into the next wave of innovation? How can we prepare the leadership team to make investments and de-risk your portfolio in a well manner? And at the same time, we as corporate innovators need to have the reality check to really understand how does a large corporation work, because we need to make the innovation scalable within their own organization. Ideally, that's where you get easier alignment. So if I can prove we have this vegan fish product, just to name an example, it fits a brand that you already have in your portfolio, and we tested it works in retail, boom. Then everybody's easily, wow, we need to do this. When can we start? Then everybody wants to start it yesterday, let's say.
I see.
What if, and that's the problem with also how we sometimes execute within the corporate innovation, is that we're not, let's say, working on a startup. We're working on a new business within a large company. And what I sometimes see in the industry is that, you can create a lot of cool things, but it's not scalable within the organization. So we need to think twice if we say, look, well, this vegan fish product, it's fantastic. But then we need to be very cautious about new brands or new types of channels. If we see there's a big opportunity to create a different business model, that automatically means that we need to manage the scaling up part very different. So
Yeah.
It has consequences that needs to be managed, and that's something where things sometimes derail. Yes or no?
Yeah, it has consequences that they need to be aware of at the beginning.
Yes.
When they start, and sometimes they are not thinking about it. And when I think about like, it's like taking people from a startup and bringing them into a big corporate, or having a great idea and growing within a big corporate, demands from them to think differently about what they're doing. And maybe in some cases they will say, okay, this vegan fish could cannibalize our current fish sales, and therefore we're not sure when it will be more profitable. Would it be that, like, will the markets take it or not? And would we be able to sell it as much?
Yeah, that's correct. And a lot of these questions we can answer. But in the end, it's also about the leadership that say, look, this is the next big thing. We find this very important. So we're going to take that step. And that's for me a more entrepreneurial mindset, in the sense that we don't have to think twice that this is the next big thing. Now, who is picking it up and bringing it to the next level? And all these questions in between, how much can we sell it? Can we scale it? We can figure that one out if we do our job, right?
Yeah.
But somebody needs to make that shift in their minds, like, okay, fuck it, very simple. I'm going to cook this up and we're going to make it big. And that's what you need with this type of innovation. If you don't have that strong leadership, sponsorship, there's no use to start, even, in my opinion.
And do you feel that they have these capacities to change and think differently and to grow and to have decisions that might maybe impact the companies in 5 years, not in 1 year?
Mm-hmm. Look, in general, I think I'm positive, but it takes time. It's a journey, right? So it's not a project that you stop, finish, etc. It's really a journey with a bigger, let's say, change component, because basically you ask of the senior management to do two things simultaneously. Yes, execute your current business, which already has a lot of implications for the leadership team, and then also at the same time invent the future. And you cannot do both just a little bit. So sometimes people talk about a chief entrepreneur. I don't really mind the framing, but you need to have focus on inventing the future, and doing it simultaneously at the same time is just very challenging. And they call it ambidextrous, right? So that's also a whole term that is popping up in this domain.
Right.
But I feel that if you want to invent the future, you need to have time, money, portfolio, leadership alignment, a clear end-to-end process, all types of things to work on. So you need to work on all these things at the same time.
Wow.
And if you are used to, let's say, work for the last 20 years and executing a large-scale business, you are basically trained to do that. And now suddenly we ask you, well, you need to look at all these small opportunities, which you most of the time miss because it's small. But how can we nurture something small to something big? That's basically what we ask from these people, to change their perspective on how to do that. Yeah, and some people pick it up easier. For some people, it takes longer. But it's basically a learning process, or maybe a de-learning process, right?
Yeah, it's a de-learning as I see it, because they're so used to doing things, and in many cases they are very successful at doing that.
Yes. Yeah.
So why would I need to change if I'm doing things well and everything is going fine? And even if I believe that something might be different, it demands for me to be very convinced that it will have a very big impact on the business, and I should do something right now and not like postpone it. I guess that it's hard. So we're talking like we started talking about like vegan options. So I guess that there are many other things growing from the COVID crisis. So how do you see this crisis impacting these organizations and companies?
Nou ja, let's say a lot of businesses flourish and a lot of businesses are hit hard. So, for example, out of home, so all restaurants and all that, of course, there's no business there. And that's a problem. So you see shifts in what is the new business model for restaurants, for delivery. You hear about ghost kitchens. It's a big opportunity where a lot of investment is made. So it's not about restaurants anymore, but only delivery kitchens. So you only have kitchens and you can still order with your favorite restaurant, but it's somebody else cooking somewhere that menu, right? So that's a very different model. So that's at the one hand for out of home and the horeca restaurant business. At the same time, it also accelerated the convenience in home. And now that we would like to, because we need to spend more time in the house, you want to make a nice time in the house. So there's a drive to convenience, luxury products in home, more premium products, and D2C, so direct to consumer e-commerce models of delivering it at home, sometimes in a personalized manner. So you can personalize your offering on a convenience level. Then we also have personalized nutrition with the whole idea of immunity, which is of course becoming a bigger topic. So how can we create products that help boost immunity, but you are a different person than I am from a biological perspective, right? So how can we personalize that? So a lot of big changes happening in the sense of the restaurant business and that delivery model, and how can we make money in the future there, about immunity and how can food help us support the immune system, and the whole idea around convenience, e-commerce. All these three things are accelerating at the same time.
So if you see so many new opportunities, do you feel that organizations are moving faster, or are they still really cautious and afraid?
Well, I think that it starts with the consciousness. I think this consciousness is well landed, I would say, because these people are also living in this world, right? If you work at a food company, you also live in. So if you look around and you see the news, I think that awareness is really there. So it's not so much about the what, but how do we execute then? And that's the problem, like we discussed, because basically, if you want to dive into new opportunity spaces, you're not organized to deliver on that. There is not a personalized nutrition division that is working on e-commerce models. It's not there. Sometimes very small, but if this is the next new big thing, you cannot do it with 5 people part-time, right? This is
I totally understand. I think that what people are like, you don't need to tell them stories about change and what might happen to your industry right now, because they see it and they feel it like in visceral, and they know it. But I think that the gap between what needs to be done and how to do it is so big, and innovation is like insurance. You need to know it all the time. And once you really need it, you can execute.
correct.
But to execute when it's really needed and when it's about like very, very more urgent, I would say, it's much, much harder to do it.
Correct. Yeah. So if you add there's a tendency, of course, that we call scaling up, right? So it's around scaling up new types of propositions. And there you see within our own industry, but also within a corporation, that to scale up, you need to work on the hard things, structure, process, metrics, funding mechanism, leadership alignment, let's say these types of things. But what we do not talk about is what does it actually take for people that now work within a corporation or for the management. Even if you hire outside in people, what does it mean for you as a person to work on such an adventure? Basically, that means a lot for the person that drives it, because what happens is you create a different power structure, and suddenly the people that never had spoken to the CEO or the vice presidents, now suddenly every 2 weeks you talk with these people about the progress that you make around a certain new product. It is involved about money. So when it's about money, there are always more stakes at play, I would say. And it's about, so there are a lot of changes that you basically create, but that we're not always talking about. But if you don't manage these changes, the different power that would happen, different relationships that you create, to deal with money at the same time, to make it big, that demands a lot from the team, and for the team as human beings, in the end, and I think that's very important.
I think that changing your mind and looking at things differently and maybe doing things differently demands so much out of you. And people who working so many years in corporate would find it a bit like intimidating, even like,
Correct.
This is what we've done till now. We got like, yeah, you're great. We got lots of like, the best worker, the best employee, operation excellence, all that. And now you're telling me it's not enough. Now maybe you need to do something different, or as a company, we need to do something different.
Yeah.
And I think that most people would not want to change. It's very hard to change.
Absolutely. And so if you think about it in that way, is that the team and the business needs to go into new opportunities, which is exciting, but also very uncertain. How would this work out? You change the relationships within the company of how you work together, which creates a new power balance. It's about money and investments and all that type of thing. And we also actually say some old processes need to die in order to make the new work. So if you all frame that up, let's say sum it up, wow, that's a lot of things that you need to, next to the metrics, next to the process, next to, and then also you need to build that product, you need to make it big. So that's a lot. And therefore I feel that the success is not only in talking about the hard things, but even maybe more about, are we equipped? Are we training our venture builders in working on all these different levels at the same time? And that creates a lot of emotions. It creates a lot of emotions in the team, between the team and the management. And how do you manage that, right? And are we training our people to do that actually? I think that's also a big piece to work on.
Yeah, what you're saying about the emotions, I think it's related to fear of change. People they don't like to change, and when you really try to pressure them, it's not good, because if they don't understand why should it be and really change from within, you cannot pressure them to do it. And if it's really hard for a company to do, how could it be under such a pressure? They know that there is a change, and the change is faster and accelerating, and now they need to do it in parallel to other things, like making their stakeholders as happy as a year in 2019, and all of the things that are expected from them, like usually in the normal business.
And what is interesting is what you say is that, how do we make the management happy? I would say, look, we are not in the business of making them happy. But that's important to mention. So what happens if they are not happy? Which is most of the time the case, because all the numbers are very small, right? So distrust, for example, and how do you work with that? And that is for me such a crucial thing. And that if you sort of are not aware that that is actually taking place, you cannot also really intervene on that, right? And most of the TED Talks are about creating positive energy, creating trust. Well, I completely agree. But the reality is that when you start building new ventures, there's more distrust that people don't talk about, but it's actually there. So how do we work with that? How do we help our venture builders work in such an environment to make sure still the new big business is, coming out of there? And I think that's just something yeah, super relevant.
Yeah, I
That
think that what you're saying about the distrust is something that, like, we're talking about what should be and not how can we tackle things that are currently in our business.
in the
And
reality, right? What's
yeah,
happening here in reality, because that is,
yeah,
if we're not sharp on, hey, who are involved in the meeting, how do people look, what do they say, what do they don't say, how can we manage this, all that. Yeah, it's yeah, you need to be, as a venture builder nowadays, you need to be equipped to do a lot of things.
it seems that we're talking mainly about the soft skills of leaders.
Yeah,
And it's really strange that this is so like at the top of what needs to be done is really understanding people first, and then you could operate with these like resources. And many people think about leaders like having a vision, knowing the numbers, handling the business. They're less thinking about them as really understanding people, the way they think, the dynamic within the team and within the company, and who would even anticipating what's going to be the reaction of each of these like entities when they do it.
yeah,
And it's really demanding from you as a leader, especially if you're not sure, like,
yeah.
because there are so many uncertainties. You're probably not sure, you believe in something but you're not sure that that's the right thing.
And Eddie, how it works. If you are not sure about what you're telling me, then I would feel that.
Yeah,
And that will color my perception of what you're actually trying to tell me. And then the data can be fantastic, but I still do not disconnect it from you as a person, right? So, yeah, it's super important. And what is also interesting about, yeah, what you see in the leadership literature or work is that, like you said, you need to have a vision, you need to take the people on board, etc., etc. But for every argument, for every statement, I can also make the flip side of it. So, what if you don't have a vision? I can also come up with arguments in which that also might work. So, leadership is
yeah,
always very context driven, right? And that's what it makes. I think one of the top things for venture builders to work on yourself, your personal leadership skills. Where do I block as a person and why? Yeah, what does this tell me about myself? It doesn't have, because you filter your reality, right? You have this filter going on, which you
mhm,
create from, early childhood, etc., etc. That's all known. But so how do I filter my perception? And is this actually the right type of interpretation, in the sense, does this bring me any further?
yeah. It seems that they have so many demands from leadership these days in general, but these days even further, because what was stable for maybe 10 years or 20 years in the past now it could be stable only for 3 years, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'm thinking a lot about, I have 4 kids, and I always think like, what do they need to know and what are their skills and capabilities? And I think that the main thing that would come to my mind is the way you handle change. You need to know how to handle change because everything is so much faster and faster. And when they'll go to be in a company and really be an employee and maybe some days maybe growing within the company,
Yeah.
They need to know that there is only one constant, which is change.
Yeah,
And we see that even further right now.
yeah, I totally agree, and that basically what we a little bit touched upon is also the dark side of change, right? So what happens when you start changing things? Yeah, not everybody is hallelujah, not everybody
I
is
would
in
say
that.
most of them are not.
Yeah, but we are not talking about it a lot, and that's so interesting. So we always try to, yeah, we need to be positive and a good energy, but what if people are mentally not there? Because there's so many uncertainty. There is fear. There is excitement at the same time. Yeah, super interesting. So agree. Our children should also work on these personal leadership skills next to whatever competency is at that moment in time when they're big,
Yeah.
relevant.
Yeah, I think when we're thinking about really handling these challenges within the company, which is a major thing. It's not like 5% of what's going on is people depressed or feeling anxious and talking in the next to the coffee machine. I think it's like much more than that. I would say like, I know, like even 50% sometimes, depends on the company and the people, of what is preventing you from doing things that you believe that maybe right now we don't see the value, but we could see the value in the future. And especially if you're not interested in changing these people. Sometimes you can say, okay, this department is not really able to adjust, and maybe we should change him. But I guess that most leaders would prefer to have the expertise and knowledge that these people had through the years and leave them within the company. And therefore, these people needs this capability to do things differently.
Correct. And one other important element, and that's a bit less on the personal leadership skills, but it's about fundraising. So let's say within our company, I'm putting this mindset in place, let's say, or work on that for my own colleagues and also at the client side, is that, look, in essence, we are fundraising. And then fundraising within a corporate environment. So how can we find data from the market, from the consumer in lean startup, build, measure, learn, rapid prototyping way of working, so that in the end, when we create an investment deck in which we clearly state, backed up by evidence, this is the customer, there are so many customers out there, we have a product, we validated it, we sold the product, the price point is good, the viability makes sense, let's say from a first estimation, it's scalable, it fits a brand, boom, 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 all these checks, boom, boom, boom. And then a great pitch with a very confident, entrepreneurial-minded person, and then asking for the next round of investment. And then what I see happening, Eddie, is that, let's ask a 200K. No, 5 million. Also put there some bold, so you need to help the teams also think a bit bigger. And what do you really need to make it big? And if you ask such a small number, I'm already skeptical. Well, is that because you don't really believe in this idea or what we have done? Or you are afraid that the number is too big and that somebody else rigged? In essence, it's driven by fear.
Yeah. And you never know. Like it could be like too much or too little until you get the answer. You don't know. And it's the same for any entrepreneur who will go to a VC and say, like, this is what we understand from the market. We need this amount.
Exactly.
And they need to know what is the meaning of that amount. And especially within a corporate, I'm not sure that there are so many people adjusted to saying 5 million. I need 5 million. How many people within the company is like so used to saying that number? Maybe someone from sales or from marketing, I don't know. But as a industry leader, as a knowledge expert, usually you're doing what you're doing. You're not used to talking about these numbers. Correct. And to be sure about it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so a lot of work to be done, I would say.
Sure.
For the good. So,
yeah, it's surely not boring. That's what I could say.
Absolutely not. No. Absolutely not. No.
Sure. So I didn't ask about your book. So you wrote the 10x Growth Machine, and I wanted to ask from you, like, what is the most important thing that companies need to know about growth that they don't know right now?
The most important thing is that if you are aware of the fact we need to change the way that we work, we need to put the customer back in the product development process, we need to speed up our time to market, all these things that you hear more often, we need to put an entrepreneurial spirit back in the company, right? All these things that we sometimes hear, or you see posters on the wall, right? Or memos that you read. What I think the most important thing is to be aware of that if you go into this journey, or go all in, or don't do it. Because otherwise, I really think it's sort of a waste of time. Because if you only run programs, for example, to validate MVPs and understand opportunity areas. But you don't work on your innovation accounting system, for example, or training your venture builders in what we have discussed, personal leadership skills, or making sure that you're placing the right bets and that you have a clear definition of innovation within your leadership team and nobody's pushing there. So I think if you go on that journey, go all in. Or maybe think twice if you really would like to go into that adventure. And I think going all in, you cannot always ask people when you did not start yet, you need to go all in. But I think it's, again, what's the big picture that we try to achieve here? So zoom out on what are the toughest problems to solve. That can be that you need to take responsibility as a company on societal matters, like we started our conversation. It can be a simple, let's say a big thing like we need to grow our business because otherwise in 10 years we don't exist, because the world is changing so fast. But we also have an obligation for our employees. So you have so many. So what are the tough problems that we need to solve where you would like to have the leadership focus on? And then go all in on how to execute.
And what you're saying that if they don't go all in, they will do like half of the job, and they will be frustrated and maybe waste lots of energy and money on the way.
Yeah, because it's very interesting. I was just reading like 2 weeks ago an article on corporate life cycle venture building. So the life cycle of corporate venture building, and the research was saying that basically the life cycle is 1 till 3 years. So every company, and they named a couple of examples like PepsiCo and Disney and Nokia and you name it. They basically said, look, somewhere starts a signal. We need to change the way we work. We need to tap onto these new spaces and personalization. We need to work more entrepreneurial. You name it. So a first initial enthusiasm is there. Then you start actually working, and then boom! It's more difficult than we thought. And then because you cannot scale, because you don't have the right processes in place, you don't train your people in working on the change component, which is very crucial. If you don't do that, you can never get your return on investment from your venture building activities. Never. It's impossible, right?
Yeah.
And there you see that a lot of companies start initially very enthusiastic. They put up labs, right, and accelerators or whatever we name it. And then within 3 years, it's shut down.
Yeah.
Because people ask, hey, what is actually coming out of it? And then surprisingly, if we're really honest, not a lot.
Yeah. It's not enough. Lots of energy going nowhere because it cannot really grow. It doesn't have the conditions in order to really grow further than just trials.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Like another thing that could, what you said about 3 years, that many of the CEO come for a 3 years period, more or less. Exactly. They come into the company, and this is what they're 3, 5, 4 years. This is more or less their lifetime as a CEO. Yeah. And what they need to do is something really related to right now. And sometimes when they go, many things that they started would probably change with the new CEO. So It's really interesting to see if it has any connection between these changes as the corporate changes.
And the only thing that makes sure continuation is in place or can happen is that you deliver actionable and tangible results to the business. Because then suddenly everybody would like to be identified with the lab or whatever it might be.
Yeah, we know that I think that 97% or 90%, I don't remember the numbers exactly, of corporate ventures fail. And most leaders say that they are not happy and content with the results of innovation.
Yep. And that's a huge number, 97%. Wow, I was not aware.
I don't know, something like in that's more or less, these are the numbers. They are really, really frustrated, more or less.
Yeah.
That means that something needs to be done, or it could be done better.
Absolutely.
I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
lots of work in front of us, I would say.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why I've written the book, and it's more focusing on let's say a couple of more tangible things like the fundraising mechanism. If you want to go beyond the core or disruptive innovations, start separating it, but not too far, because otherwise you cannot use your unique advantages that a startup doesn't have. A startup doesn't have money, a brand, a team, nothing. It's always looking for money and that type.
Yeah.
And that's how to build this system, how to build this machine. Yeah, that's really what the book is about. What type of things we need to work on.
The 10S growth machine sounds really, really interesting. Yeah. So I want to thank you for your time. Before we finish, I want to ask you, how could people hear more about you and contact you if they have any question?
Well, they can contact me by LinkedIn or by email. And so my email, is it okay to share it then?
Sure.
Yeah, so my email is Misha, MESHA @innoleaps.com.
Yeah, that sounds really easy to say. It's Innoleaps with S, and that's the only thing. Yeah. So I want to thank you for your time. It's been very interesting and fun for me to talk to you. So thank you, Misha.
Thanks for having me, Adi. It was nice.
Sure. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining me. You're welcome to visit invincibleinnovation.com, and I'll see you next week with another insightful talk. See ya. I'm Mazor Kario, and you've been listening to the Invincible Innovation Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, invincibleinnovation.com, where you can learn more about our programs and my book, Innovating Through Chaos. I'll be waiting for you next week in our next episode. Thank you for listening.